Hi, this is Hank with the Author Stories podcast. I want to tell you about our sponsors this week. Scrivener is a piece of software that I have used for over a year now, and it's more than just a word processor. Scrivener is an entire environment for writers that lets you not only write, but organize all of your writing, outline. It has a great corkboard view, which a lot of people love, which is a visual way for laying out your book before you get started. Folders to track character sketches, places to hold information and notes, everything that you could ever imagine that goes into your creative process, Scrivener can handle. If you go to getscrivener.com and use the coupon code HANK, you can get 20% off the already low price. I would also like to thank ThirdScribe for sponsoring the podcast. ThirdScribe is a author website solution that allows authors to connect with readers in a very unique way. Imagine if Facebook and WordPress have a baby and then that baby is raised by librarians. It grows up, falls in love with a beautiful web designer, and together they bring literary fulfillment to millions. That's ThirdScribe. Go check out ThirdScribe.com today.
Well, thanks for joining me this week on the Author Stories podcast, where we bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. I have two very special guests this week, a husband and wife team, Jasinda and Jack Wilder. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
You're so welcome, and thank you for coming on. I like to start each of our interviews by asking my guests, what is your story of how you came to be a writer? What was it that, and even before you got published, what brought you to this?
Well, I think what made us writers is that we just always were writers. I think that was part of our God-given gifts. My husband pursued it more than I did. I worked more in theater, and I wrote a lot of monologues and plays, and he was always writing novels. I just think that's what our gifts were, but we never thought we could make a living doing that. So we did what a lot of people do that don't feel like they can use their gifts that way. We decided to be teachers and try to help other young minds that might want to get into creative and performing arts. And that all was going pretty well until we had our fifth child, who was born sick. He got RSV like right when he was born.
Wow.
Yeah, and he wasn't doing well. It was very touch and go. He was hospitalized for a long time, weeks, and we were trying to take care of our other kids on top of that, had 4 at home. And my program that I had been working, a community program that I had been working with that was a large chunk of our money while my husband was in school, got cut. Mm-hmm. And so we had crisis on top of crisis. My husband was in a master's program at the time and was trying to get his certification. And we had a call from them, and they said, "We hate to do this to you. We know your son is sick, but this is a very competitive program. There's people on a wait list. And if he can't get back here in the next couple of days," they gave us 48 hours, actually, to this program, "we're going to have to cut him."
Good grief.
Yeah. And so we just started crying, basically, trying to figure out what we were going to do. We had kind of put all of our eggs in one basket for him to finish this program, because we had been struggling, we were living week to week.
Which a lot of people are.
Yeah, we had school loans that helped us along the way. But with 5 kids and our youngest being so sick, it was definitely a critical time. And we just prayed, and we both really felt there was no way for us to leave our kids. Even with the support of our family, we just couldn't take care of everybody with him being, because this was, a program where he was there every day. He was student teaching on top of doing the program. So it was a very time-consuming program, and we just didn't know how our son was going to do. We honestly didn't know if he was going to pull through at that point. So we told them that he needed to leave the program, which was probably the hardest decision we ever made.
Still has.
Yeah, still is. because we just had invested so much time and money and effort into that. And we were looking then at that point to any other way we could bring in extra income. I mean, he actually answered newspaper ads to muck out stalls at local horse stables, because we were just anything and everything we could think of to try to bring in extra income at that point.
Sure.
And we actually had a neighbor. A lot of our neighbors, we lived in just a great community, had brought over meals for us because we were still running back and forth from the hospital, and just they knew that we didn't have a lot of money, so they were making us meals. And one of them suggested to us that we should try self-publishing. She knew that we had always been writing stories and that we liked to write. And honestly, when she first said it to us, we kind of thought it attached a stigma. Not that we weren't desperate past that point, but we just were like, I don't know if that's what we should do. And is that too hard? Like with the technical side of it, we didn't have at that point a whole lot of even experience or even like a good computer. To be honest, at that point, like, could our computer do that?
We were using a 5-year-old third-hand MacBook
at that point.
Nice.
Yeah, for him for school. So we didn't even have we didn't know if we had even like the technical know-how to do that. And so we talked about it. I think maybe a little bit, a couple conversations, and we kind of just put it aside, looked into other things. And then a friend messaged us with a link to an article. I think it was about Amanda Hawking.
Yes.
And I remember I looked at it and I was like, this is interesting. And I went downstairs to where my little desk was, and I just started Googling self-publishing. And all these different blogs came up, and I remember Kindle Boards was one of the first ones, just a bunch of different resources. And I sat down there. Yeah, Conrad's blog, the indie publishing blog he had.
Right.
And so I sat down there. I can remember specifically, I think I went down there at like 8 o'clock in the morning. And around 7 o'clock that night, my husband came down and was checking on me like, what are you doing down here?
Still alive?
Yeah, because I was just...
You completely fell down the rabbit hole, didn't you?
Yeah, I was consumed by the information that I was finding. And so I said, hey, we need to sit down and talk. And I think I read Conrad's entire blog from start to finish. And like I said, my mind was kind of blown by what I was reading. And light bulbs just kind of clicked for me. And I was like, gosh, we have all this stuff just sitting here. I think we could do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was early 2012. And I kind of was, again, still worried about the technical aspect of uploading.
Right.
That just sounded so scary to me. Like, you're going to put a book out there. We have to make sure it's right. So we took an old book of poetry that we had that was like, compiled of our poetry. And we just did that as like a test book to see if we could get it up there. And we decided just to try Amazon first, because that seemed like the easiest process when I was looking and researching. And so we put that book up there, and we told some people. I think my mom knew.
Your mom, my mom, and...
I think that was it. We didn't really tell anybody because we were scared that we were really going to mess things up. So we put it up there, and it sold a couple copies. I mean, the funny thing is, like, in poetry, if you sell like 4 books in a day, you're like the number 1 book in poetry.
Right.
Still that way.
Yeah, it's still that way. So that got us excited because we were like on a bestseller list, and we sold, I think, just a handful of copies of that book.
30 total.
Yeah, 30. And I was like, okay, well, we did that one book. Let's try to get some more out there.
Which was 30 more than you'd ever sold in your life, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, it just, that was we
huge.
felt successful then.
Sure.
Day one.
Yeah.
And so I I said, we just need to clean the stuff that we have up, get it prepped, ready. Let's kick out a couple more. Let's do some series. Because I just was really looking into what was selling really well. And, we just were so lucky. Angels and God, they were just directing us, because some of the first people that I reached out to, even before we had published an actual decently selling book, were Hugh Howey, Liliana Hart, Bella Andre. These are like self-publishing superstars that I accidentally happened upon and reached out to, that actually responded to me and gave me some good advice. So before we even published, we had some really good information and some good support set up. And so the first couple books we put out, we tried a bunch of different pen names, a couple different genres. My plan was to just kind of like throw darts and see what stuck. And so we used different names. I think what happened, kind of in a funny mistake sort of way, is no matter what genre we put up, no matter what pen name we use, the reviews that we got always mentioned the romantic aspects of our book.
Aha.
Yes, that's exactly what
happened.
That's exactly what I said to my husband. I was like, I think that's where our talent lies, and I think no matter what we try to put out, this keeps creeping in.
Even in my post-apocalyptic dystopian
science
fiction, reviews were saying this was a really great story, except there was this element of romance and sex that I didn't
like.
understand or didn't like.
Yeah. So
because no one falls in love in
Right.
a dystopia, right?
Yes, if the world is ending, there's no time for that.
Right.
So, I think we kind of just, from those initial books we put out, which honestly, the first month, I think we put out 3 or 4 books that first month.
Yeah.
And from that alone, we paid our house payment, which at that point, this was like a couple months after our son had been sick. We were so behind. It was going from week to week to hour to hour. I was telling someone else in an interview that these certain moments I can just remember in my mind. They're engraved there. And there was one night where there was nothing in the house to eat. Our kids were just crying and moaning that, they were hungry and they were hot and, just everything was wrong. And so we had looked through the house, through couch cushions, digging through old envelopes, digging in our car to get $5 to buy a Little Caesars pizza. And that's honestly where we were at that point. It could not get much.
We'd already had pawned all our jewelry.
Yeah, we already had pawned everything at that point. We had nothing in our house. And that was where we were. And it's I can laugh at it now because it just seems so crazy, but that's really at the point we were at. Yeah. And having any money come in was a miracle, was just so beyond our expectations. We really thought that a few people would buy our books. Maybe that first couple of months, if we even had an extra $100 for groceries, that would have been phenomenal.
Or just keep our electricity on.
Yeah, or keep the electricity on, really. Yeah. And by month 3, we had sold $10,000, over $10,000. And then the other really important thing, which I think is, I never remember to say it, but we didn't even have a car that fit us all. So we were kind of just in a really stuck, that summer, we couldn't really take the kids anywhere. It was just a desperate time. And I really think had we not been in that desperate of time, we wouldn't have spent so much energy into getting as much material out, which I really think was key to our success, because desperation is a huge motivator.
Sure.
And when you have 5 little kids crying, saying, Mommy, this sucks, we're hungry, and, that kind of motivates you to sit on your butt all day and all night and write whatever you can when you see that the audience is responding. That was what's so great about the technology we have now and the time that we're in, is you can put a book out and within hours have a response from your reader. So we would get these books out, and at the time we were trying to write more novella because we just wanted to get a lot of shelf space, increase the titles that we had out there.
And serials were big then. Anyway.
Yeah, serials were the hot thing. And so we were doing like these novella, 30 to 50,000 words is kind of where we were at. And we would get responses in a few hours. I mean, people were staying up all night to wait for these books to go live and read them and review them. And so we knew we had an audience right away, which is exciting. I mean, 10 years ago, authors were, waiting to hear something. We were hearing it immediately. So that really motivated us once we knew we had people that liked what we were doing, that got what we were doing, and wanted more. So
lots of people we didn't know were buying our books.
Yeah.
And coming from where I was, I grew up a voracious reader. I was the nerdy little kid that sat in my basement all summer long and, read a book a day.
You too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking always thinking, oh man, it would be great if I would, someday be able to, write and publish a book. That was my dream. It was a pipe dream. It was always a pipe dream. I would like to publish a book someday. And then suddenly, just almost by accident, we were selling, we had written 24 titles in 3 months, and we had sold $10,000 worth of royalties. It was just flabbergasting.
Yeah.
I'll bet.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, that really pushed us in a way that if we were just doing it on the side to make some extra dough, it wouldn't have been the same as when we started to feel that fire of, hey, this may pull us out of this mess. It really, we needed that. We needed that little kick in the butt, I think.
Yeah.
And we honestly didn't. I mean, we joke about it. It's been joked about it in interviews before, but we didn't do anything else but write that entire summer, which could probably classify us as horrible parents, and I'm sure, should have been reported. But we honestly just told our kids, we have to work. It's really important. Go play outside. And for 3 months, we just sat home, didn't sleep, didn't shower much, and wrote. I remember one of the first breakouts for us was Big Girls Do It Better. And I wrote that book on an iPad, holding my son in my bed with one finger.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah. And
how long is that book? How many words?
So I think it's just under 15,000 words.
Yeah, it was
Good
just.
Lord.
Yeah, it was just and it was like in one sitting I wrote that book.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I felt like this was the kind of time where we had to get content out. It had to be, because the readers were wanting more the minute they finished reading what we had put out. They were emailing us and messaging us, which we hit a niche that really hadn't been explored with the Big Girl series. And I think they just were, so voracious and just wanted more and more and more. But that series really then got us that core audience right away that is still with us today.
Mm-hmm.
That's still our core audience. But I think that really was key. The amount of material, I think it was 18 titles in 3 months.
Yep.
Under that one pen name. And that was after our initial pen names. This was like phase 2. So 18 titles under the Jasinda Wilder name in those 3 months. And they're varied lengths, but most of them are novella. And I think that really was part of the big picture of what pushed us.
Now, you said that first month you put out 4 titles, and you also said that y'all said, well, we've got all this stuff laying around. Let's see what we can do. I mean, obviously you guys had already been writing, or
yeah.
And you said Jack was more the writer to begin with. What kind of stuff did you put out to begin with, and what stuff did you have just laying around?
Well, the funny thing is what we ended up really putting out there was not what was on our computers. After we looked back, I mean, it was a lot of partial pieces of work. We kind of, I think you get better with everything you write, right? So a lot of it just, when we went back and looked at it, we're like, it would be easier for us just to start fresh than put the stuff that we had up there. So I think we maybe took one of his sci-fi that we expanded on
Yeah.
That was series. But pretty much everything else we scrapped and started over and did from scratch. Just because it just didn't fit. I didn't think also a lot of it wasn't commercial. A
lot of the partials on that I had been working on was, just I grew up reading sci-fi and fantasy mostly, and so that's, what I was writing. But, it was me cutting my teeth and learning how to tell a story and how to craft a character. It's not something I'd ever, show anyone or publish, but it was learning material.
Right.
And we went back and looked at it like, hey, can we use any of it? We both looked at each other and went, no.
Yeah.
So we started over, and I think that first month we wrote the first 3 Preacher's Son stories, and you wrote the first Big Girl story.
Well, that was phase 2, though.
Well, that was phase 2. That was after we decided
just change pen names. But I think the other thing is we took a lot of those same characters from previous stuff and put them in. There was a lot of foundational work there, but nothing. I mean, one of the things we decided when we started bringing money in was to read everything that was selling. That was our other part of our business plan was to figure out what sold, because it's one thing to write a book, and a lot of times I think we write a book for us as much as we write it for the audience. But at our particular point and situation, we really needed to bring the income in. It wasn't just for us. It was,
for the art.
Or for the art, or the sake of the art. It was for putting food on the table. And so I went through and I remember we looked at the Amazon Top 100 list, and I took half the books and he took the other half. And some of them we just said, we don't need to look at that. But we looked at the ones that were selling and we read through them very quickly. And we would note the things that we thought struck a chord. We would note the things that we felt like were done really, really well. And because we don't want to just write a book to write a book. We want to write a book to connect with our audience and to be profitable. It's our work. Even when we started bringing in those first couple of dollars, I also have a business background, and I said, this could be something. I knew from the start, just because of the reader responses and the emails that we got and the reviews, that I just felt it, that this could be something here. And so I said, we have to take this seriously. We have to know what's going on with the market. I mean, what is really selling? And at that time, the first 3 books in the Amazon Top 100 were the 50 Shades books. And, I sat down and read those books, and I said, you know what? These are interesting books. They're really hitting something here, but I don't really connect with the female character. And really, that's what the Big Girl series came from. Yeah, was just my feelings about the 50 Shades books. And I think it was really important for us that we did do that we took the time, because that was honestly time away from writing. But having that time to read through what was really doing well, that was also a huge learning experience for us, about the reader base as a whole and what they were looking for and what worked and what didn't.
Now, you brought up a good point a minute ago about, Jack, you said that you were mostly a sci-fi and fantasy reader, which meant the first things that you wrote were more sci-fi fantasy. But as you put things out, everyone kind of hit on the romantic elements of it. Do you think that, how important do both of you think that genre is, and is it really, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this question properly, but does genre matter as much as long as you're telling compelling stories about compelling characters?
I think it does matter.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because here's the thing. I mean, if you look at sales as a whole, 60 to 70% of books sold across the board are romance. So if you have
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. So 1% of that is a big difference than 1% of any other genre. So I'm going to go after the biggest genre and try to get my little piece of the pie from there. I mean, I think we were very lucky because we naturally, our stories lended towards that. Now, do I think that if you are diehard, passionate, mystery thriller writer, that you should try to write romance? No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we were very lucky that our stories were lending towards the best-selling genre.
Sure.
I also think it's really important that, you have to look at what your reviewers are saying. A lot of people are writing one particular thing, thinking they're trying to hit one particular audience, and it's not always connecting, and that a lot of times can show in the reviews. I remember early on someone told me, don't ever read your reviews. And that struck me as weird because as an entertainer, I worked with theater. That's my background was. I always wanted feedback. I would have these, improv lessons where we would want critical feedback from our peers and critical feedback from our audience. And so that was very strange to me. And I do still read every single review. Because I think it's important not just to, write a genre that you're passionate about, but make sure you're hitting what those readers in that genre want. That's why if you're, going into sci-fi, if you're going into mystery thriller, if you're going into historical romance, I think it's important you read the best-selling books of that genre and know them and know why they're selling.
So is that how you target a new genre without pandering to the audience, so to speak, if you're listening to what they're asking for and taking your strong suit and delivering on that? But because it seems like there would be a lot of people that say, oh, well, romance is where 70% of all the novels are. Let me just go and write there. How do you do that without insulting the intelligence of the reading audience?
Well, it must be noted that, the largest bulk of what I read growing up when I went out to pick my own books would be sci-fi and fantasy. But just as often, my mom would bring home books from the library, and I would just read whatever she was reading because we had, similar taste in books. And so I read all of, Diana Gabaldon's books. I read that entire Outlander series and a whole bunch of other stuff that later I discovered, would be classified as romance. And so it wasn't like I'd never read anything with a romantic element. And also, once we started getting those initial reviews, because we didn't start out writing romance, we started out writing paranormal
Fantasy,
romance and fantasy
sci-fi,
and sci-fi.
dystopian.
And like we said earlier, people kept saying, there's these elements there, and we had that aha moment, there's this element here. So we started reading the romances, and that was eye-opening for me because I realized I understood how these stories were structured. I've got a degree in literature, and a lot of that came from learning how to pick apart a story. And so that's what I would do. I would pick apart a story and figure out what made it tick. And I realized it's not that different. It's just telling a story. It's just about the setting and what drives the plot.
I mean, and another thing, I think, people say write what you know, which, again, is one of those things that I'm like...
It's misleading.
Yeah, it's misleading. Yeah. But we always, just like he was reading, I grew up reading my mom's romance novels. The movies that we usually went to were movies with a romantic element. The books we read together were books that had romantic element. That's a huge part of just what we as a culture like seeing. And I think there's a difference between like writing just for the sake of writing or just I think there's like a balance. We wanted to write these compelling stories that had this really gripping, because, part of what we like is suspense. We really like doing suspenseful type stories as well. So we had that want to have these really on the edge of your seat. We don't know what's coming, suspenseful, exciting reads. But then it kind of clicked for us like, oh, but this is also a huge part of it, because those reviews in general for those first books we put out were either we love the romantic element of the story or we hate the romantic element of the story. So something was hitting a nerve either way. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So I think that kind of pointed us in a direction, just in a way that we wouldn't have come to just ourselves. It was looking at that feedback, looking at those reviews, looking at the work we had put out there, and then that kind of pushed us into, this is what really you should be focusing on.
Now, that is some very practical advice that you've given about looking at the reviews, taking positive feedback from your reading audience. But the other side of that, and all of us as writers have dealt with this, what do you do with those 1-star, 2-star, 3-star on the fence reviews that are just nasty sometimes? How do you handle those?
You know what? I appreciate the time that anyone takes out of their life to write a review, good or bad. And that may make me a very weird person, but I appreciate that something about my book either pushed someone to write something very positive about it, or struck them in a way to push them very negatively to want to write something about that book. And for me, either way, I feel like I've done my job because I've made them feel something.
Yeah.
So
I guess the biggest enemy we have is apathy. If we write something that they just don't care about, I think that would be worse, huh?
Absolutely. And our best-selling books are our worst rated.
Yep. They're the ones that people say, some people, they 5-star at 1,000,000 stars. I love this book. And others go, this is the worst book in the history of the English language, and we hate it. But my view on the negative reviews is, you read a negative review, 1-star, 2-star, read it and ask yourself 2 questions. What is it they don't like, and why? And if it's just they didn't know what they were getting into, or they're just a nasty person that gets off on writing nasty reviews to be a bully, then you can disregard it. But if they have a legitimate complaint about your book or the story you told or the characters you created, then take that to heart and change it for the next book. Learn from it.
Yeah, we try to learn from them. And honestly, you can almost feel from a review if the review came from something inside your book, or if the review came from something inside the reviewer. And what we found is, more often than not, it's something from the reviewer. And just as an example of this, I'm of the thinking that I never want there to be an issue that I don't feel brave enough to explore or touch if it's inspired me. So there's one series we have where there's infidelity, which is usually a huge no-no in romance. It's
very divisive.
Very divisive. And so I had a letter from a woman who just hated me, wanted me to die. She hated the story. She hated me for exploring this. She just, anything, angry you could think of, with all kinds of creative words, she wrote to me. And I just wrote her back saying I'm sorry she felt that way, that it was just a theme that inspired me, that I wanted to explore it, that I felt it was one couple in one story. I didn't mean it to reflect every relationship. And I waited a couple days, and she actually ended up writing me a response to that, where she said, you know what, you're 100% right. This is totally my issue, and I've never dealt with it, and I'm sorry. And I was just like, whoa. But I said to her, I hope, I'm sorry that you had that negative experience reading it, but I hope it at least brings some healing, and I wished her, the best. But I think a lot of times there's no way for you to look at a 1-star review and not feel the person that's behind that. There's a person there.
Yeah.
So we just try to be thankful for anyone who takes the time to read, to review, and we hope that readers enjoy it. We don't want them to walk away hating us or hating the book, but sometimes that happens. I mean, if you, as a creative person, you have to know it's like a painter that paints. Some people get it, some people don't. Just put it out there, and hopefully more like it than don't.
I'd also rather someone read my entire book and hate it than stop after the first 2 chapters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what a great attitude to have, and I think we can all learn from. And just because we're publishing novels, making art, does not exempt us from empathy and still feeling what other people are feeling.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you see once a review, you still go, oh man.
Yeah, I mean, you're allowed to feel that. It's when someone doesn't get what you tried to put out there. Yeah, it's frustrating. But I think some people take it too much to heart, and it ends up hurting them in a way that stifles their creativity. And we really try not to let that happen.
Now, you guys have tackled some very tough issues, and you mentioned it with infidelity, but you've also tackled some very deep emotional issues in some of your books. How do you go about integrating those things into a genre that is not necessarily known for that sort of thing?
I think it's hard, but I think we realized early on that the breakout books we had, like Big Girls, which was about a woman who was insecure and didn't feel comfortable in her skin and was really trying to figure out love and sex and relationships. And with Falling Into You, where our hero dies in chapter 4, I think those kind of stories were the ones that readers thought, you know what, this isn't what I'm typically reading. This is something different. And so those are the kind of stories that have always inspired us to write. The stories that are people struggling, people making mistakes, people who aren't perfect, and how they get through that, how they, find love and resolve whatever those things are in their lives that have been holding them back. Yeah. And so that just is what inspired us. Do I think that everybody gets it? No. I mean, I think some people, I was talking to a blogger today about the books we've put out recently, and some of them are very feel good. The book that came out today is like a modern day erotic romance. It's very, very feel good. It's very fairy tale, and it doesn't have a whole lot of angst. And then you have Beta, which we just put out, which is just a crazy, dark, erotic thriller, basically. And the book that we're putting out next, which is a very emotional, angsty book. And some readers like one kind of story and some readers like the other. The thing that we want to get our readers to know is that whenever they pick up a Jasinda Wilder book or a Jack Wilder book, they're going to have just a good book. It's going to be a good experience, no matter how that process goes. But I want to kind of hit on different things that have inspired us. I don't want to have to write the same story over and over and over again with different character names. Yeah. So we try to just go with whatever's inspiring us, and then hopefully that translates to our audience.
Would it be safe to assume that the majority of your readership are women?
I think the majority are, but I do see kind of this new thing happening, which I actually love, where the women are reading the book and then they pass it on to their husband. And we really try to write a book. That's why I think our, being able to write together is unique. We usually write in the female and male voice, dual point of views, that there is that balance where you get a lot of action. We love putting action in our books. You get the male point of view. You get sexy on both sides, And so I think that a lot of our readers, I just had a reader email me yesterday that her husband asked for one of our series in print for Christmas because he likes to read print versus ebook. So I think couples are starting to read these books together. I know a lot of my audiobook readers are listening to our stories in the bedroom, which I think is awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I think that now we're starting to get more couples reading, which honestly, when we first started this, it came from, we always read the same books. I would read it and then pass it to him and vice versa. We loved Shapeshifter, Paranormal Romance, Sherilyn Kenyon, those kind of books. J.R. Ward. Yeah, we love those books. So we always pass those back and forth to each other. So I love the idea of couples both reading our books and more men reading romance, because I think that is just going to make things better in that relationship. That's what I hope.
Well, and we hear a lot about barriers coming down within genres and things, and women being more accepted writing sci-fi, fantasy, and things like that. But I don't think we hear as much about the other side with men coming over to genres that are traditionally, more represented by women. So
yeah, and I will say, honestly, if we put his name on a book, it sells less.
Mm-hmm.
And that may just be perception. It's kind of a weird thing, but if his name is attached to the book, it does, from our statistics, usually sell less copies.
Which is totally understandable for me. A lot of traditionally women coming out of, the romance genre, whether they were reading, the bodice rippers of the 80s or, the things that were being published in the 90s and currently, it's an escapist situation for them. It's an experience that, they're picking this up to get away from their life and just escape into something a little bit. And so for them to read a book and know that it was written by a guy, I think it just somehow tampers with that escapist experience for them. And that I totally understand that. And so for a woman to read a book that is a romance or an erotic sort of book that's written by a guy, that's a test of faith. It's a leap of faith for them. And I appreciate every reader I've ever had because of that.
Right.
And I think there are walls coming down, which is great.
Yeah.
And I think men reading romance is hugely important because, men look for love too. We're just not as vocal about that's what we're doing.
On the down low.
We're not just looking for sex. Most of us, we're looking for someone to connect with and identify with. And that's what our books are about, it's not just about the sex, and it's not just about the love. It's about life, and it's about how all that works together.
Right.
Now, looking at your website, it looks like you have about 26 titles or so available under Jasinda Wilder.
We just looked because someone else asked us for Jasinda Wilder. I think the total, if you count the novellas, because a lot of them we've now condensed into one because we just thought that was easier for our own sanity to do that. I think technically the number of titles we've published under all pen names is 47 now. But like I said, we're trying to condense because it's kind of crazy. We're trying to move some of the old pen name stuff onto Jasinda Wilder and kind of condense it because we had, at one point I was running 5 Facebooks. Yeah, which I don't suggest doing that.
No, it's hard enough running one.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So we're trying to condense.
So 40, did you say 46 or 47?
47. This was the one we published today is 47.
And the one-
47 since 2012.
Yes.
And those range from a lot of
sleep?
We didn't sleep. No. The great thing was we had babies keeping us up all night. So we didn't sleep much. But I think, it's a momentum thing. We just wanted to keep the momentum. And honestly, again, one of our gifts is just being able to write really freaking fast.
Yeah.
So that helps. But we had to hit while the iron was hot. We couldn't just sit around. And so, yeah, we kind of just ran with it.
Yeah.
So what is the creative process like for you guys?
It's a $1 million question for people with us.
I feel like I wish I could explain it in a way that made sense to other people, but it really depends on the book. When we start a project, usually we have talked through that book a dozen times before we sit down to write it.
Going back months.
Right. So like our talking, because we're constantly talking to each other about our stories. So our talking about the book that we're going to be working on is usually 3 or 4 books in front of the book we're actually sitting down to write. So it almost becomes like a dictation versus like just sitting down and pantsing because we've already talked it through so many times.
Step by step, scene by scene.
Yeah. So that is probably kind of unique to us. We never stop talking. I mean, we don't hardly ever watch TV. We don't go out much. When we're going on trips to travel for our book signings, all we talk about is our books. So we're just always, having this constant dialogue that then translates to paper. So that's kind of unique. The other thing is that we constantly are sharing back and forth, and our process has kind of changed since we've moved to this house, because prior in our old house, our desks were literally side by side. So we were talking also all day while we were typing, and testing the dialogue on each other and testing what we were writing. But now, I think that honestly slowed us down, because now we're in side-by-side offices, so there's a hallway in between our office. And that actually has increased productivity, because we meet and talk in the morning, and then a lot of times I'll go in his office and we'll talk, but then we kind of separate and do our own thing and then swap. Mm-hmm. Which, again, I think, our relationship has always been very unique. We were best friends before we were anything else. We've always finished each other's sentences. We always know what's in each other's heads before it comes out. And so I think the system we have is probably wouldn't work for most people, because we're also together 24/7. And whenever I talk to other couples, they're like, I would kill my husband if we were together that much. And I don't know how you do it, but
neither of us need me time.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well,
we're always in communication.
I actually really understand that process. When I wrote my first book, Bloom, my wife and I would sit in our swing in our yard, and we would talk about it, and we would go through scenes, and then I would go in and I would write, and I would come back, and I was like, well, how does this work? And we would talk it out and hash it out. Awesome. And it was like I had outlined it,
right?
But I hadn't actually outlined it, but I absolutely knew where I was going.
Right.
So it was outlined in my head, just not on paper.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's interesting, because a lot of times we've talked through a book 3 or 4 times. We think we know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
And then it goes in a completely different direction.
One of us will write a scene, and the other person will go, okay, so wait, hold on a second. What happened that we talked about?
That's not what we planned.
Wow.
So, it's kind of like an outline, but it's a creative, movable outline. And I think for us, like I said, it changes book to book, because there's some books where I just feel like it's more me. There's some books where I feel like it's more him. And it's funny, because I've had readers email me, and they're like, I know this was you. I know, I can tell, which parts are Jack and which parts are you. And they're always wrong. They're never right. Because I think even our relationship,
we can channel each other's thought process.
Yeah. And so
creepy.
You would think that it's him, but it's not. So I remember in one of his earlier works, one of the scenes that we got a lot of feedback on, people thought was him. It was very action-y, and it was me. Mm-hmm. And then there's another specific scene in a particular book that we get questions about all the time in the Big Girls book that everyone thinks is me, but it totally wasn't. It was him. So it's funny how we're just, that's just how we work. And like I said, I don't know if a lot of other people could work that way, but that's just how it's evolved and worked for us.
Now, when you sit down to begin a book, do you have all the scenes worked out? You said you talk about it a lot. Do you know where the ending is and all that before you begin?
Yeah, we usually do. I mean, like I said, when we talk it through, it's literally from the beginning of the book to the end, scene by scene.
It starts with, hey, I have an idea, and then it goes from, okay, that's stupid, to, hey, this could work. And we talk about, what the first thing that we always figure out is, what's the core conflict? Is it going to be, external? Is it going to be internal? Is it going to be, this couple against the world, or is it going to be this couple trying to figure themselves out and each other out? And it's going to be, what issues what issue is going to be, faced in it.
Yeah.
And then we'll start to talk about, scene by scene, we'll figure out, where they are, where it's set, and, and by the time we're ready to start writing it,
it's all laid out.
It's all laid out, and then there's always still surprises.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you write every single day?
Every single day, all day long. And it's
sometimes not Sunday.
Yeah, sometimes not Sunday. But I will say that also came from us having this feeling of we have to run and run hard and run fast. And I think it's really hard for us now to slow down. Like, we have to consciously, like, both of us, you know, do that, because we just for so long had that pressure that it's just what we do now. And I do feel like we've always treated it as a business, but now even more so, you know, from the time our kids go to school, well, the majority of our kids go to school, to when they get home, that is office time. And we're in our office and we're working, and we treat it as a regular, you know, 9 to 5 job, except we keep working on Saturday, and sometimes we keep working on Sunday.
And social media never stops.
Yeah. So, I mean, we kind of have to. It's really, really hard for us not to.
It still feels like if we don't surpass our 5,000 word daily minimum, that it's been like
a fail day.
Fail day. Like, that's our usual daily limit is, you know, we do 5,000 words every day, and if we do more than that, we feel pretty good about it. And if we, you know, things come up and only get, you know, 2,000 or 3,000 words, then we're like, that was crappy. We didn't get anything done today.
Yeah.
So is that 5,000 words combined?
That's minimum each. And I would say a lot of times we'll get closer to 10, but it just depends on the day. I mean, you know, when you have kids, things happen. We had a bout where all the kids were sick, and we were just like, how are we going to get our word goals in, you know?
Yeah.
And so you just kind of have to figure out a balance. We're still working on that. We really, really are. You know, we, a bunch of our friends, actually, Hugh Howey, Bella Andre, Liliana Hart, Barbara Freely, we went to London last year, and we had this big dinner talk about finding balance and trying to relax, and we're trying to do that. But like I said, it's harder usually for us than not, because we just have this feeling like to be productive, even if it's not something we're going to use, even if it's just stuff that we just want to get out, that creatively having that everyday goal in writing session is important.
5,000 words a day each is nuts.
We know.
Yeah.
That is crazy. I just finished NaNoWriMo yesterday, and I had several days where I got 5,000 words and just felt like a machine. I could just imagine what that's like every day.
Yeah.
Well, I think also the other part of it is, you know, it's not necessarily just about word goals. That goal has come from our natural pace.
Right.
You know, and when we're hitting the end of the book and we're really, you know, have the story really, you know, in our teeth, you know, we'll sometimes surpass that by double. But
Yeah.
it's also a matter of creativity is something that thrives on being exercised.
Absolutely.
It's a muscle just like anything else. It's a muscle just like your biceps and your triceps and your quads. You have to exercise it, and you have to use it consistently, and you have to stretch it for it to really be as strong and productive as it is capable of being.
And I think the other thing that's really important when people talk about how prolific we are, I always point out that when we first started this, we had 2 babies. Our 2 youngest are 13 months apart, and we started writing when our youngest was born, and our second oldest was 14 months. And so we had 2 babies. So we would literally have only hours of time to write, and we would sprint. So because we were constantly doing that, constantly sprinting to see how many words we could get while the babies were napping, or when they would let us put them down, you know, for an hour or 15 minutes, no matter how long it was, to try to get as many words as we could in the amount of time. So doing that trained us to write really quickly. I would almost liken it to, like, you know, if you're in a newsroom and you have that, like, you know, really frantic feel, so it pushes you to do things faster. That's kind of how it was for us, because we had these little bursts of time where we had these opportunities to write, and so that's how we learned to do it that quickly.
Learning to tap into your creativity immediately, not have to, you know, have like a big seance and light candles and, you know, swirl your teeth 3 times counterclockwise or whatever it gets people to zone. That's all great, but we didn't have that luxury.
Right.
We had to be in it. We had 15 minutes, so let me see if I can get 500 words done before he starts screaming at me.
Well, and that was going to be my next question, or my next statement, is that it's hard to maintain an aloof, artsy air about you when I've got to get this done, and I know where I'm going, and writer's block and the muse and all that stuff are sweet, and they make for good stories, but it's not really the reality, is it?
No, it's funny. We were talking to some of the people from Create Space, and they were like, tell us about your day. And so we told them, like, literally, hour by hour what our day is. And they were like, that's not how we pictured it at all. We thought maybe you went for a walk. And then I was like,
That's cute.
no, not at all. No. We're not getting inspired by nature. That's not what's happening. So I think that's like a fairy tale. That's a perception of a writer's life. It certainly is not at all our lives.
We also don't stop to block out certain types of scenes all the time either.
No.
Wow. I'm just, I feel woefully inadequate in that I need to go write right now. And
all the time, though. That's just us.
Yeah, we're freaks. We know it, and we embrace it.
Do what works for you. Work at the pace that is your most productive. And the other thing is work at the time that's most productive for you. Neither of us are night owls. We're old and we're parents. So by 8:30, we're exhausted. 9 o'clock is my sweet spot. Start lighting and I'm good.
Yeah.
In the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Well, guys, this has been a wonderful hour to get to spend with you, and thank you for carving it out of your for your day. And I apologize for taking away from your 10,000 words today. But but the more people I talk to, the one thing that really rises to the top with all successful authors is that the harder you work, the luckier you are. And I think you guys are prime examples of that. And if you want something and you want it bad enough, then you've got to put the hours in. You've just got to put the time. There's no way around it.
Yeah. It's hard work. It's rewarding work, but it's hard work.
That's right. Well, you guys have some big news today. You have we're recording this the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and you have a new book release out today, and you were in People magazine. That's pretty nuts.
Yeah, total surprise to us. We just found out that we are in an Amazon pullout of the back cover of People magazine. They have our picture in our book. It's like a full page. It's crazy.
So cool.
It's amazing.
It's a huge KDP ad. It's a huge honor, and we're like baffled and thrilled at the same time.
Yeah, very cool.
That is so cool. Well, where can people find all of your stuff?
We're actually on Amazon, iBooks, Kobo, Google, Barnes & Noble when they get it up. They're a little slow in getting our new release up, but hopefully it'll be up. So Trashed is the release today. It's the standalone sequel to our New York Times bestselling Stripped. So we're very excited
about it.
Pretty much
wherever ebooks are sold, you can find our books.
Yes.
Awesome. And you also have a website, don't you? JasindaWilder.com.
JasindaWilder.com.
And you guys have links from there,
yes.
From everywhere. Great.
Absolutely.
Jack and Jasinda, thank you for taking an hour out and chatting with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Happy writing.